Hi, Tracy.
Hello, Hari.
Welcome to another podcast of Leela Life.
It's a pleasure to be here. I'm honored to be here.
Thank you.
Sharing this with you.
Right, and we've been having a lot of conversations about the place of guides in the Leela Life system, and the experience you've had. So, and that's really the context of our conversation today, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So, fire away. Ask me questions. Tell me a little bit about what's been happening, and let's take it from there.
There's so many questions. Okay, so I think that, I've been to a few salons.
Mm-hmm.
I've been working through the process with
Mm-hmm.
clients,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm finding it fascinating, first of all. And I'm curious, and maybe our listeners are too, how you came up with this method and then created the blueprint and then the pivotal aspect of having the guides be a part of it.
Got it. Okay.
I know that's a 3-part question.
That's fine. That's fine. So how I came up with the method.
Mm-hmm.
So a little bit of backstory. So let's get into that for
Right.
a minute, and then
Okay.
we will get into. So the backstory is that I spent 30 years being in the world of business. First half of that being a management consultant, working with teams across the world, trying to build large projects in India, raise capital across the world, bring capacities and technologies and competences from across the world to build airports and ports and complex stuff like that, and try to make them happen in India. And so very interesting work, very complicated work, very communication intensive work, and all of that stuff. And once I finished with that, and I kind of had my fill of that, I moved on to another career, equally fascinating. I completely shifted paths and became an internet entrepreneur at a time where neither the internet nor entrepreneurship was particularly big in India, and created India's first online travel community. Another incredible journey. But what kind of the common thread when I look back at these two journeys in business was that I spent a lot of time among really accomplished, successful professionals from across the world. And as I did that, I started to notice a pattern. And that pattern then became the source of my sort of inquiry for a long time in life, which is that a lot of successful people from across the world, when they get to success, realize that they haven't got something that they thought success would give them. They feel a lack.
Mm-hmm.
And the difficulty with that problem is that they can't really explain what that lack is. There is a lack.
Mm-hmm.
I know I don't have something, but I don't know what that something is that I don't have. So some people explain that in more common terms, like I'm not happy or I'm not contented. And some people will say, I'm not enthusiastic about life. Others see it in manifestations, right? I'm having difficulties with my relationships, and so on and so forth. Or somebody gets poetic and says, I have a hole in my heart and I don't know how to fill that. And when I heard that the first time, it really struck me as a good way to sort of describe it. And what intrigued me in that was that, I was roughly in the same place in a peer group in terms of accomplishment and success, but I didn't seem to feel the same problem, right? So that intrigued me a lot.
Seems like you had more awareness.
And I think so I didn't know why that is. And then I sort of spent time thinking about it. And that process of thinking, which took me a couple of years, took me back to my childhood. And I realized that part of it was because I grew up in a world which was very rooted in the sort of Indic way of living. There are a lot of things we now have big labels for and big names for, chanting and seasonal eating and yoga and so on.
Fasting.
And fasting and
Yes,
what
yes.
have you, and art of a certain kind, and all of that was all just part of life. You didn't sort of have labels for them. They just existed. Your grandmother fasted. You woke up every morning and did certain things, and it was just what it was. And I came to the conclusion that a lot of that, not having that same sense of lack, had to do with that world that I lived, and which I had continued to live. So that way of living had continued. But what I did not understand in that is, how does that experience translate for other people? Because I was born into that context, but does it really work for other people, and how can I make it work for other people? So that became the sort of thing that I was obsessed with, saying, how can I translate this experience of mine into a structured thing that I can give to other people? And that led me to a decade-long journey into Indic knowledge. So I went back to what is the knowledge which kind of powers all of the stuff that I did. I just did by osmosis, right? I was there. Folks did it, I did it. But there is knowledge behind it, I suspect. And therefore, I went behind that to learn it. And I spent a long time. Read up a lot of stuff, met masters from around India, met grandparents from across India to understand, how they lived and what led to that and so on and so forth. And it is a sort of culmination of all of that in terms of all that knowledge being available now with me as a structured thing, and then thinking about it, saying, how do I translate all this for a contemporary existence? How does it work for a lawyer in New York City? How does it work for a stockbroker in Shanghai, and so on and so forth? And that, in a sense, that reflection ultimately led me to the Leela Life Method and the 5x5 and many other frameworks that we use today. Long answer, but that's really
no,
what
it's a beautiful answer, because it just, the way that I've heard you mention it before is you would go to these negotiations and sit in these boardrooms, and everybody's bringing their game, right? They're bringing their spreadsheets, they're bringing their projections, but you noticed that one thing was always missing from that environment, and it was just a simple, subtle thing like a smile.
Correct.
And that is just so powerful that nuance is kind of what spearheaded this whole journey for you, to be like, why aren't people smiling? I mean, it's so simple, right? But when you get wrapped up into your everyday and we'll get into the innate qualities, but as you start to move away from that, you see them drudgery through life. It's hard. It's not enjoyable. That word enjoy, right? Enjoy, inside, then out, right? So with all of that, you created the Leela Life Method.
Yeah.
And through that method of understanding people better, you give them a blueprint.
Yeah.
That is basically like, the way I like to say it is, we all wish we were born with a manual, right?
Yeah.
And we are, but we just don't know it. And like you said, we have to learn this information, where you are blessed to be brought up in it, and you've extrapolated a lot of the wisdom from the culture so that it is portable around the world, and it's available to everybody. And I think that's beautiful. So let's talk about the blueprint, and just a little bit. I think it's fascinating, and I think that the way that Leela Life does it is so beautiful. And when I get to present it to somebody, the story and how their eyes spark when they're talking about their childhood and things that did bring them joy, and how they can realize how far they've come away from that. So just give a little bit of background about the blueprint and how it's such a foundational piece of the journey for somebody through this experience.
Again, let me just go 2 steps back before the blueprints,
Okay.
because I think it segues well into the blueprint, which is really saying at the end of the day, there's a one-line secret that Indic Wellbeing tells you about how to get to a good life. And it's when you know that one-line secret that everything else then starts to make sense. And the one-line secret is this. For those of...
Yeah, don't leave us hanging.
The one-line secret is this. The way to a great life, the way to a joyful life, the way to well-being is to live a life as closely aligned as possible to who you truly are. That's it. That's pretty much it. And like I keep saying this, right? Saying it's so simple, but till you know it, you don't know it.
Right.
And the moment I utter it, it's so simple. Oh, wow. That's it. And it becomes part of your life. We've heard that a number of times in salons. People say, now I can't unhear it.
Yeah.
It's now inside me. And so that's the underlying point, right? So how to get your life aligned to who you truly are is the objective of the method. That's pretty much what the method is trying to do, is to help you there.
Right.
So there are two parts: who I truly am and my daily life. There are two parts. So what the blueprint is trying to do is to help you figure out the first one, who I truly am. Because it's easier said than done, right? We all are surrounded by, that's right, so much noise and so much, sound, that it's very difficult for us to sift through that and say, what's the signal here? Who am I? And the good news is that the Indic system actually has a very rather simple way of figuring that out, in terms of at least saying who you truly are is really a function of what your innate qualities are. And we will, of course, discuss innate qualities, but what your innate qualities are. So what the blueprint tries to do is really, more than anything else, help you discover what you already have. So it doesn't get new things for you. It really just allows you to quieten the noise, hear the signal, and take you back to that place of saying, who am I fundamentally, which means what are my innate qualities. That's really what the blueprint is trying to do.
Right.
And once you have that with you, now remember that once you have that with you, now it's all about your life. Now it's your journey. Now you've got a starting point. Okay? I know this is who I am. Now I need to look at my life all the time to see how can I reshape it so that I'm much more aligned to who I truly am, and I don't get myself into situations where I'm inherently in conflict with who I am. It might not be easy to do immediately, but gradually you will get to a place where you're more and more and more and more aligned to who you truly are. And that journey, it's an extraordinarily beautiful journey, highly enjoyable journey. So journey is the reward in many ways. It's not this final mythical point where it's all in alignment. No, the wonder is really that day-to-day journey of observing yourself, becoming more self-aware, seeing what you truly are, seeing how that affects your life, and slowly shaping that life back into it. A very intensely personal journey at one level, but a very, very rewarding journey, but a journey that requires some support.
Right.
And that support is really what we do after the blueprint, right? So that's the thing. So the salon, in a sense, exposes you to the core knowledge, the essential wisdom, which is that one-line secret, that how you get to a great place is by leading a life that's aligned to who you truly are. Once you go past that, we give you a blueprint, which is like the doorway to your journey, which is really saying, let me figure out who I truly am, and we enable you to discover that. And then after that is the journey that you go on with yourself, saying, okay, now how do I reshape my life? And in that journey, we recognize you will need support. And that giving of support is the big part of the Leela Life Method, and really our big purpose and mission in the world.
Right. I mean, I think that I look at it from the perspective of, if you buy a new phone, for example, it comes with all this fun stuff, and you're going to look through and try to figure it out and be like, oh, look at all these fun things I can do with this phone. But then how you use it is different than how somebody else uses it. And that's the uniqueness of every person's blueprint.
Correct.
And we all are, would you agree to say that the blueprint that we are given at birth, it doesn't change throughout our life, but how we live, we should be changing how we live to keep aligning back to it, to let go of that static and really start to tune into that clarity of who we are versus trying to find a radio channel when you're, for those of us that remember FM radio, when you drive away from your hometown, it gets staticky, more and more staticky and more, and then you're flipping through the channels trying to find something, and when you come back home, it's clear as day again. So it's a coming home of sorts.
That's a lovely analogy. And it's exactly right. Coming home. So you already have it in you.
Yes.
It's not that we help you, it's not something new. We help you rediscover it, in a sense. So sift through everything, rediscover it. So you're exactly right. And so what gets in the way of that discovery in our normal life is that, and this is particularly true for people who are very accomplished, is that accomplishment very often, we believe, needs us to play a role. So we are a leader of some sort. We are a top lawyer. We are a CEO. We are a whatever, right? And we believe that is a it's a robe we put on, and we go out and play that role in the world, and we become successful at that. But every time we do that, we go away from who we truly are. What we don't realize is that we can actually do that same role not by putting on this robe, but actually being more true to who you are. And you can probably still be as effective, sometimes more effective. In fact, in almost all cases, more effective.
Everything becomes easier, right?
Everything becomes easier.
Right.
And so this role playing that we take on in life, and all of us do it all the time, gets in the way of being able to hear the signal, because the noise gets in the way. And it's funny. The more accomplished you are, the more capable. What it simply says is that you're more capable of holding to this dissonance between who you truly are and the roles that you're playing. But the challenge is that somewhere along the line, that becomes something that even you can't handle. And at that time, it really becomes a big
Friction.
issue, big friction in your life. And so that's one of the challenges that accomplished people face, and why this is a real issue for accomplished people. For people who are sometimes less accomplished, they might see this earlier and, without realizing it, instinctively go back to their home,
Right.
to who they are. But accomplished people sometimes don't. And so we help them discover the idea, relook at themselves, and then go on that path.
And I think that this is where the guides are so important, is a lot of the times the noise becomes you can't hear it anymore. And then it gets louder and louder, but you keep ignoring it, so you're not hearing the noise, and therefore you're not seeing how far you've been pulled from your innate nature. And this is where I think the guides are so valuable, is because we can see this staticky, this dissonance. It's like sometimes you just can't see things in yourself until somebody else points them out. And then you're like, oh, I didn't know I did that with my hands all the time. Or that, it's just part of who you have become. So it's a lot of unlearning, would you say, and unbecoming to re-become who you are meant to be in this world, and the gift that every person possesses to share with everybody.
No, I think it's an interesting point about how the guides are so central to this process. The way I think about it, guides do two things, and they're very critical things. One is, so while for example, the blueprint and figuring out who you truly are is not done by the guides. It's actually done by experts with deep lineage of specific methodologies that are there in the Indic system to help you figure out who you are, right? But it is the guide that transmits that to you. And I think that transmission is as important as the knowledge. And why is that important? Because what you're trying to do is not just help them discover it at an intellectual level. You're actually trying to get them to discover it at a deep down acceptance level. It's got to go into the heart, not just into the head. And so the guides are well placed and trained and come equipped to be able to do that well. So to translate the knowledge into communication that, in a sense, really starts the person on the journey. So that's one dimension and that's true across. So throughout everything that the client does with Leela Life, the guide is that central point in transmission and helping the person see what it is, as well as being a person that they can reflect along with. Right? So you're reflecting on your life and you're reflecting on specific things, but sometimes helps to have a mirror that you can have and reflect off. And so that also is a role that the guide plays. So that's one part. The other part is that it's not just what the guide does, it's how the guide lives. Because the guide is as much a person who does as a person who, by how they live the Indic, the Leela way, is an inspiration to the other person to think about that. It could be a totally different kind of life. It's not the same kind of life.
Right.
But at the root of it, it is a joyful life because the guide has figured out and is on that path for themselves of finding that Leela. And they're ahead of the client in that journey. And so that is another powerful value that the guide brings. So two values. One is the ability to take this thing that comes from the Indic knowledge and transmit it in a manner that works for modernity for people in New York and what have you, in London and Singapore, but equally to show them, give them a sense of what it means to be in the Leela way, so that they can have a reference point, saying, okay, look at how my guide is. And so, so there's that. So there are these two dimensions of being a guide. And it's our intention to make sure that we select well, and then we equip well, and we support well, so that the guides themselves become beacons.
Right. And as a guide, I have a guide as well. So we help each other as well, so that we are continuing to keep progressing on this path as well.
Right.
And I love, in a previous life, I was a interior designer, architecture. I was in the architecture world. And I love that you call it a blueprint, because in my head, I immediately was like, oh, I get it. The blueprint is the foundation.
Yeah.
And there's been a lot of planning and experts involved in creating this blueprint. And then you have all the experts coming in, the plumber, HVAC, electrician, all of them. And they all have to bring their expertise. We're in New York. There's buildings going up left and right. And you look at them and you think, oh, that's going up so fast. But the years of preparation and planning and building with the experts to actually create this thing in the sky, it's pretty magnificent. And I look at it from the perspective of the guide as kind of the contractor. Like, there are the go-between, the architect, the designers, the engineers and all the people, but they are helping create this, and without them, nothing would happen. Nothing would progress. Maybe it would slowly, but, they're working with the city and they're working with, everybody. And then when there is an issue, they hit bedrock or something, they go to the right person and they're like, we need to adapt and we need to change this. And so I look at the guide as that person, as moving through the process, that we can be that soundboard for that process for the client to really, to really push forward with bringing them back. And if they kind of go off on a little
tangent,
rogue, to bring them back and, okay, this is where we are, and just having those touch points too, because we're meeting with them at least once a month, hopefully, in live sessions, in online sessions as well. And then also you're offering a lot of resources and education sessions in between, and then we get to meet the experts. It's a beautiful process. So no one is ever alone.
Absolutely.
Which can be scary when you're doing any kind of self-worth, when you're trying to build your life back, when you really don't know what to do, because you don't really know how you got to where you are, right? And that's one of the things I love about the blueprint is the story. It's so beautifully told from the perspective of when you were a child, and really takes you back, and it gives you a little warm fuzzies when you read it, because, I remember talking to your co-founder about this, and I was like, this blueprint is gorgeous, and it's so informative in a way that you're going to refer back to it so many times.
Right.
And every time you see something new. And that's where a guide is like, oh my gosh, like, oh, I just read this and now it reads differently because I understand it better. And so much about that is the education and understanding also, you don't need to know all of it. You really are just focusing on what is working for you. So talk a little bit about how the process works in the the whole process behind the scenes, kind of like start to finish. Someone comes to a salon, they get introduced to the concepts, whether that's virtual or in person. And then they can choose to do the blueprint, and they get to meet with a guide to dive deep into the questions that aren't really available to answer in a linear fashion on a form per se. And then the experts do their magic, and then they bring this blueprint, and then as a guide, we get to present it to the client.
Yeah.
Talk about what happens from there.
Got it. Okay. And that's actually useful because, a lot of people have experienced the power of the blueprint. And the blueprint is it's an interesting thing. was incredibly powerful. Each thing in the process is incredibly powerful in its own way, right? The salon just blows you away because you get this big insight. Blueprint just, again, transforms you because you suddenly said, oh, this is me. I didn't, whatever.
Right.
And it's beautifully presented and all of that enables you to access it and to really want to get into it. But the challenge starts at that point because what you've done so far is absorb stuff intellectually so far. And where life really becomes different is when you're able to go past intellectual understanding to lived experiential understanding. They're completely different things. And in the Indic system, the word knowledge actually does not refer to intellectual knowledge. There is a Sanskrit word called jnana. And that does not refer to intellectual knowledge at all. Intellectual knowledge can be a spur, it can be a starting point. But real knowledge is really the knowledge that you have so deep inside you by lived experience and the conviction that comes out of lived experience, that it's in your heart and it's in your gut, that you don't have to think about it. So the job, in a sense, for the Leela Life Method, after the blueprint, after the salon and after the blueprint, is really to shift gears and put you into that place where you move from being just intellectually aware of things to become truly, deeply that, intuitively that. So that's what we are trying to achieve here. So that changes, therefore, its whole cadence changes, everything changes. So what changes fundamentally? And here's what changes fundamentally. In both the salon, it's me doing the thing. In the blueprint, it's the guide plus the experts giving you something, and you are absorbing it. So in both cases, you are a kind of recipient of wisdom or of awareness. Going forward, you are in charge. It's nobody else.
This is where the fun begins.
This is where the fun begins. So now you're in charge. And therefore, now you're getting into a journey where you've got all this. You have now two things to do. One, take from this and start to really figure out in your life what all this actually means for you. Are you really truly this? How do I know that I'm truly this? And so on and so forth. And then look at your life. And you don't have to do this you don't know how to do this, right? How do I do this? And so that's where the Leela Life Method really kicks in. It gives you two things. One, it gives you a set of activities that you must do on an ongoing basis with yourself so that you can then get to a deeper awareness of all of this. How to observe yourself. How to experiment a little bit with things in your daily life. How to iterate. How to learn from those iterations. Small things. So there's a set of 7 steps that we help you understand and say, these are the 7 steps that you have to keep putting into your life. Simple stuff, but just observe, just try a few things, see what is happening, stuff like that. So that's one part. The other part is, life is a 24 by 7 by 365 by whatever number of years. So it's a lot of life. So where do I start? And so that's where there's a framework which we call the 5 by 5 framework, which took me well over a decade to develop, which is really saying map the entirety of living into a small framework and then say, look. So basically what we have done is there are 25 boxes in that framework, which are essentially 25 doorways through which you can look at your life. And it's simple. And therefore, look at your life through those 25 doorways. So it's not an infinite number of things that you have to look at. It's simply a certain number of things that you look at. And then through that process of those activities that you do, through these doorways, you will start to sense what's actually going on. And this magic between this set of 7 activities and this framework is actually the heart of the blueprint, and the salon is really not the heart. That's just the starting point. This is the heart of the journey that you're going to go on. And this journey is highly individualistic, highly personalized. Each human being will go on a journey different from the other person. And we recognize that. And therefore, what we have done is built a structure that enables that to happen. So we haven't boxed it.
Right.
So we have something called the circle and path, which is really a monthly cadence. For 2 days in a month, always a Friday and a Saturday, well calendared out for the full year so you know when it's happening, you will get exposed to education about these frameworks and these methods. You will get exposed to practices and insights from the Indic tradition. You will get exposed to products, experiences, retreats that are available. All of this becomes the learning background in addition to what you learned in the salon blueprint for you to then do those 7 things and go through this framework, right? So for 2 days, you do all that. And one of the other things you do during 2 more things that you do in those 2 days. One, you meet with your guide. Said, okay, so the last 1 month, this is what this is what I learned, this is what I looked at. And so you're essentially having this conversation with the guide, which is a reflective conversation about that month and a slightly forward-looking conversation about the next month. And saying, this is what I'm trying to do. And the guide's role is really to listen, to gently reorient, and so on and so forth. So that's really one of the things that's happening in addition to the learning. The second thing that happens in addition to the learning is you connect with other people just like you who are on the same path. But every path is different. So you get connected to a peer group of similarly accomplished people in New York City and across the world who are on a similar journey as you. So imagine the combined power of this. Just think about that. You've got this extraordinary insight from the salon. You've got this deep awareness of who you are and discovered it in the blueprint. You're continuously learning what the Indic knowledge is all about and the methods that you can do to harness that for yourself on a daily basis. You apply all of that on a monthly basis. Then you meet with your guide to reflect on the month that went and to think about the month that's coming. And at all these points in time, you're also enveloped by a comforting presence of the community, which are people just like you are on the same journey. So you can ask them questions, you can just chat, you can just be in their presence, all of that kind of stuff. So it's an incredibly powerful experience. Now, each person's space of what that means will be different. So somebody might get to some place in 6 months. Somebody might get to a similar place in 3 months. Somebody might get to it in 9 months. Be perfectly comfortable with that. We're not trying to force you to, because what we've realized is that the process becomes sustainable and deep only if one condition is met. You must enjoy the journey.
Yes.
If it's not the no pain, no gain paradigm. Not at all.
Thank goodness, right?
It's not at all that. It comes from a completely different place, and I'll talk about that. But it's really about saying that you must enjoy the journey. And so what we're trying to do here is to make sure that you understand that it is an important journey. There is work to be done, but it's very enjoyable. And so one of the guiding principles of that is a notion in the Indic knowledge system called Ishta. Ishta is a very powerful idea in the Indic system. Ishta means that which resonates with you, that which your heart goes towards. So whenever a guide proposes something or says, why don't you think about this or whatever, the thing that the guide is looking for is whether that person is resonating with that. And the more you can sense a resonance, that Ishta playing out, we guide that person towards that place. Because what the Indic system has figured out is that Ishta produces incredible results.
Yes.
We know this, right? Very instinctively,
yes.
We know this. But a lot of people don't know that because they're, cluttered with these notions of. I talk to people who are, for example, from the physical fitness world, and they're completely sold on this idea of pain and
Yeah. No.
Yeah. So this is a much deeper idea, much more comprehensive idea. So that's what happens post the blueprint. So you have the salon, which opened your eyes to a new way of seeing things. The blueprint gave you the discovery of who I truly am, but still at an intellectual level. And now the circle and path gives you a frame in which you can actually start to reshape your life. No pressure whatsoever. Support.
Right. It's like a safe container.
It's absolutely safe container, yeah.
And I find that once I did my blueprint, and then you meet others that have done theirs, it's like this amazing language that we can speak and understand each other, as well as you really get to know people on a deep level.
Yeah.
I come from the Ayurveda background, and just understanding doshas and that part gives you so much insight into somebody. But the way this blueprint, it takes so much more than that. It takes like this whole collective Indic wisdom and creates a more comprehensive view of who you are.
Yeah.
And so when you're meeting other people, it's kind of fun. Oh, well,
Yeah.
what are you doing now? What are you working on? And it becomes this playful, which is amazing because it becomes this playful journey. And then the way that I see that is because the word itself, Leela, means playful joy.
Correct.
And I find that to be so exciting and a little saucy as opposed to like calm joy, the different facets of joy. But I love the idea of a playful joy because, you going back to that boardroom, no smiles.
Yeah.
Oh, it's draining. I'd rather, let's bring some buoyancy and some joy around the world.
Yeah,
We need
exactly.
it.
Yeah, Leela is it's always been an absolute favorite idea. And so kind of suggested itself in this context. And I've lived like that. I've tried my best to live in that manner. There is always I like to keep myself not far away from a laugh or a smile.
Yeah.
Because, you don't have to be, Atlas carrying the weight
Right.
of, the weight of the world on your shoulders. You can be light. In fact, in the Indic system, it's an interesting thing. The Indic knowledge system actually says that the mark of wisdom is that it sits lightly on you.
And we see this in, you look at lineages of yogis and they're always at peace, and I'm sure their students are bombarding them with questions and all kinds of things, and they're just very peaceful.
They're peaceful and
calm.
they're joyful.
And
there's a certain gurgling
Yes,
of, there's an incipient laugh sitting somewhere inside them,
yes.
which is so beautiful to see. Yeah,
I remember the first time I studied with my yoga teacher from India, and he made a joke. And I thought this was supposed to be serious. And that's when I was like, oh, I love this science even more right now. It was just so fascinating. Yeah. But and so many people, we are in New York, and I've been very observant walking the streets recently. I'm used to living in an urban environment, and a lot of people are lacking this.
Yeah.
The more that you observe it, now you can't unsee it, right? Like we were talking about before, like once you're aware of it, you can't unsee it. I'm curious if you have one thing people could shift today that could maybe spark that joy, reignite what we were born with, and that as humans we should be embracing, not running away from, right? What's one thing?
I'll tell you one thing.
Tell me one thing.
Especially among accomplished people, but for most people nowadays. And I'll tell you that one thing. Reduce the intellectual, allow your senses to play out.
Yes.
Just the one thing. We don't let our senses out in any manner. So let me give you small examples of that. We are scared of color.
We're scared of color.
Lots of color. Bright, vibrant color. There is a certain resistance to that. And I walk in New York City. Why are everybody in either a pale pastel or in black? And there's a great beauty to that. And there is but there is also a certain question I ask myself, saying, where does this come from? And I think part of the answer to that lies in the fact that as a culture, we've got to a place where we are a little hesitant about the senses. We think there is something wrong about the senses. And we must understand that allowing our senses to have their place is different from being sensual. Although it's part of it, sensory, sensual. These are all elements of it, but you're essentially allowing your senses to observe, to do its thing. And it's important because our senses, when they are constrained, are a deep constraint on the human being. So it could be smells, it could be touch, it could be sight, which is when, it's sight that I'm talking about when I refer to the notion of colors and so on. So I think there is an opportunity for us to do a simple experiment with ourselves, saying, can I slightly expand the range that I allow my senses to play slightly. Can I take stronger smells? Can I take, slightly more vivid colors? Maybe once in a while. And so on. So I think if there is any one thing I would recommend as a starting point, it's not easy because we all live in a certain context. And so, it takes a certain amount of slight bit of doing. But it's a useful exercise to see textures, touch. I give you a small example. In India, what I do in our house, I've recently moved back to where I grew up as a child and where my wife also grew up as a child. So we've gone back home in many ways after many, many years. One of the things we do now is a thing from our childhood, which is, we are from a place called Kerala, which you are aware of, which is it's got a lot of coconut trees, and coconuts are a big part of our diet. And one of the things we have is we make a chutney out of that, right, with coconut. And so today there are modern gadgets to make, you can shave it, put it into a blender, you can do whatever, you can grind it, blind it, all that. But there is an olden way of doing it, an older way, which is the stone and you grind it like this.
Yes.
So now we've brought that back in our household.
Beautiful.
And we do it ourselves. So every day in the morning, both me and my wife, we spend some time making the chutney for the day.
I bet it tastes better too.
It's just incredible tasting because you get fresh coconut, you get, then you have it within,
and love poured into
the love,
it.
the person's love, and that 1 hour within, by the time you finish, it takes exactly, from the tree to your table is about 2 hours.
Wow.
That's the kind of stuff. But that's not the interesting one. That's one part of it. The tactile experience, the hands holding the stone, and that tactile experience is something these hands haven't felt from maybe except for my early childhood where I would have done this because, somebody was doing it and I did it along with that. I tell you, these are incredible things. So allowing ourselves to have these experience of the senses which are broader than what we normally allow ourselves to do, walking barefoot on sand or on mud.
Putting the phone down and looking at nature.
Looking at nature and allowing the senses to, there's no intellect. Park your intellect as much as possible and because everything is intellectual today. Everything is abstraction. So allow the senses to play. If there is any one thing I'd recommend, it's that. But of course, there are many things in life. But this is, as a starting point, as an inkling to where this could go, that's a good starting point.
I love that. I find that sometimes I'll do a test with whomever I'm with, especially if we're going out to dinner or somewhere for tea, who puts their phone away, who has their phone out versus who doesn't pull it out of their pocket or have it even on the table. And it's amazing to be aware of how connected a lot of people are to this device. And there's an entire world out there of pure knowledge. Look, here we are in the city. I can't tell if it's looking out my window. I can't tell if it's daytime or nighttime or if it's cloudy or sunny, if the moon is up because I can't see the sky.
Yeah.
And so I think about so much of this Indic wisdom is based on, part of it is based on the planets and the way that the world, our universe, is actually at pull with each other, especially on the day you're born, and that imprint that's made, and how that plays out in our lives. And if you can't even see the planets, and you can't really see them sometimes you can see them with the naked eye, but if you can't really be with it, it's really hard to connect with that aspect. When you think about thousands of years ago, so much was dependent on the sky.
Correct.
And now we've got so much light pollution and tall buildings, and it's just hard to connect with that.
I'll give you a small example. This is such a wonderful idea, and I'll tell you a small thing. For a long time, how was time measured? Time was measured by looking up.
Yeah, simple.
Looking up. Today, time is measured by looking
down.
And we measure it. There was no measurement. Right. There was a recognition of its change. In fact, what is recognized is not time. It is change. In fact, in the Indic system, by the way, there is
beautiful.
The word for time and the word for change are the same. And in fact, in the Indic knowledge system, change is the point, not time. Time is simply an abstraction, it's an irrelevance. Change is what you're all about. And so this is very interesting, that one other thing that you could do gradually, and I've tried to do this a lot in any place, is that guess what time it is without just looking at, just guess.
Yep.
And one of the things that's interesting, that is useful if you want to do that over time, avoid sunglasses.
Yes, I have been told that. And I love my sunglasses.
I know, even I do. But avoid sunglasses because it teaches you internally, your whole cognitive system, to
what time it is.
To be very aware of change of the day. The time is a kind of measure, but you're very aware of the change. So all it takes you is to go out for 2 minutes and you're plugged into the grand scheme of things. So when you're talking about the cosmos and all of that, all it takes to be plugged into that grand cosmos, you don't need to do anything other than simply get to a place where you can be aware of the passage of a day by not looking at your watch.
Yeah. It's a challenge for a lot of people, I know. I worked with some clients that were in cubicles all day long.
Yeah.
And just, trying to instill in them, if you can just go outside for 5 minutes. Just, whatever you can, but take a break. And, most of them didn't take breaks at all, which is a whole nother conversation. But it's like, just please go outside once a day, at least once or twice a day, aside from coming in and out of the building, because sometimes they would park in a garage and never even go outside to get in the building. And it's like, do you know if it's raining or snowing or, if it was a hurricane out there?
It's interesting. 40 years ago, America, something strange happened in America. The current obesity epidemic happened exactly 40 years ago. So when you go back and look at what happened 40 years ago, I've spent a lot of time looking at this, and I found two very interesting things that happened. In fact, 3 machines changed everything that happened 40 years ago. Car ownership in America crossed a threshold, and I must tell you, there's incredible numbers. From the time Ford came up with the Ford Model T till 40 years ago, the number of cars per family, per 1,000 people in America, was somewhere around 400. 400 people of 1,000 people had a car by the time it got to 40 years ago. In the 10 years after that, that went to 750 people per 1,000.
Wow.
In 10 years. So it took 70 years or 75 years to get to that 400 or 450. And then just 10 years after that, it went to 750. So car ownership just ballooned. That's one. Second is the personal computer came along.
Yes.
It was in 1980 that IBM launched the first personal computer with Microsoft DOS, and a year later, Apple with the Mac, and so on and so forth. So essentially what happened with that? Your work became cubicalized. You got into a cubicle. And the third one is interesting. It took me a long time to get to these 3.
Ooh.
The third one, the microwave.
Oh.
The microwave oven in your kitchen.
TV dinners. So essentially, the sort of triumvirate of these 3 machines so fundamentally altered our living that we lost touch with the outer space. They brought you inside. The car, brought you inside the car, which is a covered space. The PC took you inside the cubicle. And the microwave kept you inside home. So you never went out for shopping, you didn't eat, you didn't cook outside, that whole thing. Now you just push a button and it all comes to you.
And therefore to your earlier point, human beings have got to a point where they're just not just sedentary, but they're inside. So the first time in human history, settled history, 75,000 years of settlement or the 300,000 years of being human beings, this is the first time in the last 40 years that human beings have actually retreated indoors. So that's a huge impact on us. And so we have to rethink that. And to your point, we have to go out.
Yes. And it blows my mind when I hear people that have been sitting at a computer all day for 8 or 9 hours straight.
Yeah.
And when you talk about the 5x5 and the framework, that is part of it is nature and, food is a part of it, but not necessarily the nitty-gritty with nutrition. There's all these different components that make up this framework. And I think when I first saw it, I was like, whoa, that's a lot. But, we're very fortunate that I can actually take a step back and look at my own framework. And when I was working with my guide, like, okay, well, I actually do really well at this. So great. And I do really well. And it's almost like you're opening these doorways, like you said, into your own life.
Exactly.
And realizing, it's kind of reassuring. Like, I am doing some things right, at least,
Exactly.
like I'm not that far. But then the ones that are recommended to really work on, it's not like you're going to have to work on all of them. So when we get the blueprint and we get the interpretation, it's like, okay, here's a couple of things, 3, maybe 4 things to start with.
Correct.
Which one sparks your curiosity the greatest? Let's go with that. Like you mentioned, Ishta.
Correct.
Which I think is so beautiful.
Correct.
Because it's not overwhelming.
Not overwhelming at all. It gives you a very gentle start. And it's a recommendation.
Yep.
It's in fact suggestion, an educated suggestion, but we allow the innate intelligence of the human being to take over. So you start there and let it play out.
Right.
You feel more drawn to something else, so be it. Because it's your life. Your understanding of your life can never be replicated by another human being. Just such a deep understanding of your life from the moment you were born to today. You think any guide or anybody else can even remotely understand that? Not at all. So your awareness of your life is supreme, and we understand that. So that's fundamental to the method. So we'll give you these suggestions. We'll give you educated suggestions. But we also are completely open to the idea that you will have your way of looking at it. And that might take you to a path, and then you'll say, no, I'll come back. And very often you might come back to what we suggested. We're perfectly all right with that because this is not a race. You don't have to finish this in 24 hours or a month.
This isn't a box to check.
It's
either.
not about checking it either.
Yeah.
It's your journey and it's your life. And please allow that to unfold joyfully. And if that's where it takes you, please go ahead. Try it out and then come back. And of course, the fact that you have these educated suggestions in front of you fundamentally alters your ability to do it versus somebody else who does not have it.
Right.
And so obviously it's very powerful, but we can't let powerful things put us into it shouldn't become a prison. So it's wonderful. You have that power. Use it to the extent you want to use it. You want to explore outside it. Feel free.
I find that this is a beautiful place where the guide can kind of bounce back and forth with you and be like, okay, what's the resistance? And really kind of going underneath the surface of well, I don't want to do that now. Or maybe I really do want to do that. And then supporting that aspect of it, I think is just such an invaluable part of the journey and the experience for sure. And I'm curious when I'm going to talk about joy for just a second again, because when we talk about Leela Life and, the difference between happiness and all the emotions, but having this constant joy and that's your baseline now. And, one of the conversations is you hear people coming in all the time to whomever their practitioner is, chronic stress.
Yeah.
And it just has become this huge overarching idea, and it's like, I just want people to have chronic joy. Imagine if that was the norm. Well, let's just have chronic joy. Okay, let's do that, And it's beautiful because it's a choice.
It is a choice.
And we can choose that path. And Leela Life has given us the tools and the support to be able to take that path, path of least resistance, actually. So then life just gets easier. Your relationships become better. Your health becomes better because it's not just about one part. We're not dissecting the human here. It's a very comprehensive view of the person. Like you mentioned art. I don't know of any doctors talking about going and go take an art class.
Right. Yeah.
It's just not part of their vocabulary.
Their worldview. Yeah. No, it's not at all. It's not at all. And so that's exactly right. And I think it's a journey that I'm absolutely confident people will both enjoy and get value out of, which usually is not the case.
Yeah.
You can get one of the two usually.
But we can have fun doing it.
Yeah, you absolutely
Yes.
can have fun doing it, and it you will get great value out of it. And so that's been that in many ways is the cardinal approach of the Indic knowledge system, and I am which is also reflected in the name Leela, right? You want to get to and keep you in a place of that playful joy. So yeah, thank you very much,
you.
Tracy. So it's been wonderful talking to you.
Thank you. Namaste. This has been great.
Thank you.